Welcome to our fourth and last Spring Women's Leadership Forum titled Career Exploration for Girls and Women, Law and Nonprofit. I'm Dr. Susan Madsen, Founding Director of the Utah Women in Leadership Project, and also I'm the Karen Haight Huntsman Endowed Professor of Leadership in the John M. Huntsman School of Business at Utah State University, and I'm the host and will be the panel moderator today. And this event furthers the mission of the Utah Women in Leadership Project, which is to strengthen the impact of Utah girls and women. And we serve Utah and its residents by first, producing relevant, trustworthy, and applicable research. Second, creating and gathering valuable resources. And third, convening trainings and events that inform, inspire, and ignite growth and change for all Utahns. An event just like this tonight. Thank you to our sponsors, the Utah Education Network, the John M. Huntsman School of Business, and USU Extension for making this event possible. So with that, I want to introduce our panelists for our first panelist, and that is a panel on law. So I'll introduce first, I'll start with Judge Laura Scott. She was appointed to the 3rd District Court in 2014 by Governor Herbert. Judge Scott received a bachelor's degree from the University of Utah and graduated with the Juris Doctorate degree from Arizona State University. After graduation, she served as Assistant General Counsel for the University of Utah. She then joined the law firm of Parsons, Bailey, and Latimer, where she maintained a commercial and real estate litigation practice, including trial and appellate work. Judge Scott is an American Bar Foundation Fellow, a former Vice Chair of the Ethics and Discipline Committee of the Utah Supreme Court, and a past president of the Salt Lake County Bar Association. Before I introduce the other guests, I wanted to ask you, Judge Scott, my first question and have you respond. My first question is, why did you choose to get a JD and focus your career in law?
I would love to be able to say that I grew up with a passion for the law and I always knew what I wanted to do, and that was law school and become a lawyer. But here's the reality. When I was in high school back in the 80s, there was a show called LA Law. It was a great show every Thursday night, awesome characters. But there were 2 characters in particular. They were women lawyers. And I didn't grow up in a family with lawyers. I grew up in a family with teachers, and I didn't really know any lawyers, but I watched the show. I loved the show, and I loved the lawyer characters. And so when I graduated, and then the other thing I did is during college, I did a Hinckley Internship through the University of Utah in Washington, D.C., where I was an intern at the U.S. Supreme Court. And basically, I was a tour guide. I gave tours to groups that came through the Supreme Court. But those 2 things together inspired me to go to law school. I thought it would be a great flexible career, a lot of different options for what you can do with a law degree. And so I made the decision. And likewise, throughout my career, I've never really planned it. I've taken advantage of some opportunities that have presented themselves, but I don't regret it at all. It's been a great decision, but I wish I could tell you I always knew I was going to be a lawyer. The fact of the matter is I was drawn into the law from a television show.
You know, I love that story. And I wanted to ask you as well, what was your bachelor's degree? What did you major in your bachelor's degree?
I had an English degree. I love to read, I love to write, which are wonderful skills for lawyers. We do a lot of reading, a lot of writing, but I kind of thought, do I teach? That was what my parents did, or do I go into the law or do something else?
Oh, I love that. Thank you. That is funny. I remember that show. I really liked that as well. Thank you for sharing. So I'll introduce now Grace Pusovalt, who is a litigator at Quinn Emanuel. Her practice focuses on complex commercial and employment litigation. Grace received her bachelor's degree from Cornell University and her Juris Doctorate from Brigham Young University. And she currently serves as the chair of the Community Outreach Committee for Women Lawyers of Utah and immediate past president of the Young Lawyers Division of the Utah State Bar. Welcome, Grace. I'll ask you the same question. Why did you choose to get a JD and focus your career in law?
Well, I also didn't grow up thinking I would be a lawyer, but when I got to college, I took a class that was taught by a professor at the law school for undergrads. And I remember on the first day looking at the textbook, and unlike a normal textbook, it was cases. And I just found it really interesting. And I always had loved to read and write. And so I thought I would try law school. And I also didn't have much of an idea of what it would be like. I, of course, you see TV shows and movies. And since I do litigation, I've had a couple days that remind me a little bit of TV shows, but for the most part, it's been different. Of course, life isn't like TV, but I've really enjoyed it, and it's been fantastic so far.
Thank you so much. That's interesting. You enjoy writing too. So that's a theme, reading and writing. That's a theme thus far. Thank you so much. Judge Denise Porter was appointed to the 4th District Court in 2020 by Governor Herbert. Prior to her judicial appointment, Judge Porter served as a member of the Utah Board of Pardons and Parole. She received 2 bachelor's degrees, political science and psychology, and her law degree was also from the University of Utah. Judge Porter began her legal career clerking in Utah's 3rd District Judicial District, and then spent the next 17 years at Salt Lake Legal Defender Association, where she worked as a felony trial attorney. Judge Porter currently serves on the Utah Supreme Court's Advisory Committee on the Rules of Criminal Procedure and is a board member for Women Lawyers of Utah as well. Welcome. Same question to you.
Well, while I certainly enjoy reading and writing, I like talking even more. And so that's how I ended up in a courtroom. But I came from sort of the exact opposite perspective. My mom, I grew up with her as a court clerk. And so she assisted a judge. And for good, better, or indifferent, I used to get a skip school for interesting cases. And so I got to go hear arguments. I got to sit in the courtroom. And I really had an amazing opportunity to think about and decide if that would be a profession that would fit my skills. And I quite frankly thought about a career in medicine as well until I figured out that my math and science skills were sorely lacking. And my native skills lended themselves much more to something I'd been seeing and really enjoyed doing. And then I have spent my career in the courtroom.
Thank you so much. But how interesting. You know, we as women tend to come at careers a bit different. I know the research differently than men. And sometimes they emerge a little bit more and sometimes they don't. So going to our second question, what careers are available really in the field and area of law? So many of the people watching today are high school students, junior high school students, some maybe a few college students or women returning to school after raising some kids, really a mix. So this is an important question for that audience. You know, you can get a law degree, but are there different fields or areas? Grace, can you start this one out?
Sure. I think one great thing about law is there's a lot of different options within it. So for me, I work at a large law firm, which I really like. I enjoy the matters that I have in my clients, and I work from home. And so I like the lifestyle that goes with that. But outside of civil litigation, there's transactional attorneys who work on contracts. And then, of course, government in-house. There's a lot of different options within it. So I think one great thing about it is whatever you're interested in, there's probably a type of lawyer for that.
Thank you. Judge Porter, what would you like to add?
I completely agree with Grace. What I would encourage people to think about is, what type of client do you want to work with? Do I want to work with kids? There's a type of law that does that. Do I want to work with companies? Do I want to go in a courtroom or out of a courtroom? There are tons of things you can do with a law degree, and you never step in a courtroom. Are you interested in government? Many of our folks in government service happen to have JDs. And so there are lots of different opportunities with a law degree. I think they're incredibly versatile. The other thing that happens a lot in law programs is, like at the University of Utah, they have a joint JD, MPA or MBA. And so there are joint degrees which people can really take advantage of.
Thank you. And I do know, in terms of your comment about, you know, even working in government and so forth, I did some work with the group. I can't remember the group, but they advise and do research for the legislature. So it's all about public policy. And so that, yeah, I just thought I'd throw that in because I've had experience there. Judge Scott, what would you like to add?
I think when we think about what we do as lawyers and the skills we learn as lawyers, they translate to all sorts of jobs, even non-legal jobs. I mean, you learn how to analyze issues, you learn how to see both sides of an issue, you learn how to resolve disputes, you learn how to advocate positions. And so not only does that work in the legal profession, obviously, our panelists have talked about the different kinds of jobs, but I think it just makes a great advanced degree if you're interested in business, if you're interested in politics, if you're interested in government. It's not just limited to the law, because I think it provides those skills. I'd also, it's interesting, when I worked at the University of Utah, that was my first job out of law school, and I was actually in the legal department, but I worked with lawyers throughout the university. So the individuals in HR, human resources, often had law degrees. The individuals working in risk management up at the hospital, they had law degrees. People in the department, the purchasing department, who were signing contracts, a lot of them, they had law degrees. And so again, you can see people in the athletic department trying to make sure that the athletic department was compliant with NCAA regulations about what donors can or cannot do with athletes. All of those individuals had law degrees, even though they weren't technically practicing law as a lawyer in a legal department.
That is so interesting. One of the things that just came to mind as you all were talking was, I've lived in Utah for about 20 years, but I lived in Minnesota before. And I remember taking my youngest to preschool and sometimes chatting with other mothers. And there were 3 mothers who had law degrees, but they were having their kids and they didn't really even want to work for pay. They don't want to get, but they all volunteered. They did pro bono work to keep themselves up, and they loved it. They loved doing it. And so I thought that was interesting. One quick question before I get to one of my big questions. You know, it's always throughout time, I've always known people that go full-time to law school, 3 years, right? Is that is that really still the model, or are there any programs that have a little more flexibility? I don't know of any. I would think it's still 3 years, but who can help me out with that? Any of you?
I think there are programs.
Generally, they are 3-year programs. I know there are some schools out there that have evening programs and things like that, although I don't know of any in Utah. I'm not sure if the other panelists know.
Okay.
Okay, and we just had a participant that indicated UNM has a 4 and 5 years flex program.
Okay.
But additionally, you can flip it. And if you go during the summers, you can do it sometimes in 2.5 years. And so you can do it both a little bit more quickly or stretch it out a little bit depending on the program. I'm sorry, Judge Scott, if I interrupted you.
No, I was just going to say, I'm not sure if there are, I assume that there are programs available that either could be kind of a nights and weekends program with summers, or I actually don't know what the rule is if you don't finish law school in 3 years, whether you're able to continue on beyond that to finish your degree. I assume they've been, I graduated from law school almost 30 years ago. So it was, I think they're more flexible now, or I hope they are, and maybe more thoughtful about how we allow a wider group of people to get that education.
I love that. Thank you for that. Judge Porter, I'll start with you on this. So, you know, we talked about your own bachelor's degree, but what associate or bachelor's degree majors or minors would you recommend that really kind of merge well with the field of law?
Well, I can tell you this, whatever you are interested in, and I will tell you why I say that. A lot of people think that when you go to are looking at going to law school, you need to major in political science. There is no need to do that. It's what your passion is, what you're good at, because what you need to learn how to do is read, write, and study. And that's what's going to get you through law school. in my group of law students in the 3 years around when I was in school, the folks who tended to do the best were music majors. And that was because at the University of Utah at the time, that was an incredibly hard program, and they learned incredible work ethic. So what makes sense to me is to do what you're interested in so that you're really invested in it, so that you're enjoying it, so that you develop those study skills, because there are days that are hard and you need to be able to get through it. So that hopefully gives people a lot of flexibility.
Yeah, thank you so much. Judge Scott, I'll move to you next on that question.
I would agree with that. Obviously, as lawyers, we read and write a lot. But one of the things we've been really focusing on in the last few years with lawyers is wellness and being more well-rounded. And I think those who come from areas of interest other than just political science or maybe even English, I think sometimes they bring a different experience, but I also think maybe they bring some hobbies and interests that are away from the law, which I think are so critical for all of us to have a wide variety of interests and not just get focused solely on the law and on the legal jobs. So I agree with Judge Porter that any background, if you study hard, you work hard, and you're smart, you'll be able to successfully complete law school if that's what you're interested in doing.
So some of my peers, I remember years ago when I was going through my bachelor's, it was in communications, and I ended up teaching junior high speech and debate. So I took debate classes and I was a debater, and some of them were definitely going to law school after. Grace.
I think one great thing about law school is that there's no prerequisites in terms of major. Unlike med school, where there's a specific regimen that you have to take for classes, you can major in anything you like and apply to law school. As long as you have good grades and a good LSAT score, you should have some options. Although I did learn from talking to my friends who do patent law, that if you want to be a patent attorney for that specific area, you do have to have certain science and technical background. I think people often think of lawyers as, well, if you don't like science, it's the opposite of that. But even if someone's really interested in science, I think being a patent attorney and having a technical degree for your undergrad and then going to law school could be a really fantastic option.
Oh, what great advice. Grace, I'm going to stay with you to start us off on the next question. The big question is this, especially for girls and women, I think all over, but in Utah, can a career in law be family friendly? In the ways that we define that. Grace, I'll have you start us off.
You know, I think it's interesting that we all emphasize this as a big question, because I think as women, we feel a lot of pressure to be great mothers and wives and daughters and family members while also pursuing our professional endeavors. And I think for any career, whether you choose law or otherwise, as long as you know your priorities and you have time management, you're going to make some sacrifices probably in every area of your life, but that's how life is. I know for me, I don't have kids, but nonetheless like to go skiing and have fun with my friends and things like that. And you have to learn in law school how to manage your time. And then if you become an attorney in your career, how to do that as well. So I guess what I would say is whatever someone is interested in, I don't think they should let the feeling that they have other priorities in their lives necessarily hold them back.
Thank you so much. I do know I've worked with women who are able to work part-time. Back to some of those other questions, you can do law in so many different areas, right? Judge, I've lost track of where I'm at. I'm trying to rotate. Well, but I'll just go with Judge Porter next.
I have been incredibly fortunate to raise 2 kids while I've been doing my career. I've worked full-time through it all, and I have certainly not done it alone. I have a wonderful partner, and I've had a lot of great help. We had a great daycare. We work really closely with our educators, and it's not easy. It's a lot of work, and it always is for anybody that is a full-time parent and a full-time employee outside the home. And it can be done. You just have to work really hard at it, much like, and that's not just in law, that's anybody out there working really hard and grinding.
Thank you. Judge Scott.
You absolutely can have that balance if you want it. I'll just tell you a little bit about, I had my son my second year of law school. And it was really funny because when we started law school, we had orientation and some of the students said, law school is going to be the best birth control ever. And in my class, there were probably 5 or 6 women who got pregnant and had babies during law school. And it was hard. I didn't get any time off. I had my baby on a Tuesday and was back in school in a week or so. So that was tough, but it was absolutely doable. And quite frankly, it worked out great because you're not in class that often, maybe 10 hours a week, and then you can have some flexibility. When I left the University of Utah, I got divorced and my son was 5. And so when I started at a large law firm, I was a single mom. Again, it wasn't easy, but it was doable. And what I would say, echoing what has been said, is if you love it, if you're passionate about it, I would strongly suggest finding good mentors and finding friends in your community who are helpful and supportive and that you can vent to and that you can cry to and you can express your feelings to. It is really, really helpful. And then find a good family-friendly place to be. There are large law firms out there that are incredible places to work for women. There are other law firms maybe not so great. So you have to ask the right questions. But I think, again, I absolutely don't regret for a moment either working full-time or I don't feel like I was shortchanged as a parent, and I don't think my son does either.
So Judge Scott, since I just wanted to throw you and Judge Porter, did you plan on becoming a judge? Was that just something that came up?
Well, it's interesting for me. I had been at Parsons for about, 17 years, and I was a litigator and I was in court a lot. And it's interesting how some of my friends started applying for the bench. Oh. And it's interesting how that changes your perspective, because when you're a baby lawyer, when you're a young lawyer, you look at judges and think, I'm afraid to talk to them. I could never do what they do. It just seemed so out of reach. And then, you've been practicing law for 22 years, and all of a sudden your friends start becoming judges, people you've worked with, and it seems, well, okay, maybe that is something I can do. And that's when I decided I'm ready for the change and I'm ready to put my hat in the ring and see if it's something I could do.
Excellent. Any comments, Judge Porter?
I don't think you can ever plan on it, simply because it is such a challenging process to be appointed. And it's such a privilege to be able to serve in this capacity. And all you can do if you're interested in it is continue your career and put yourself in the best possible position to be a good candidate and hope it works out. There are a lot of different things that come into play that have some things to do with you, some things not so much to do with you. And you just have to be ready to be a good candidate when that opportunity arises.
Thank you. And Grace, I'll start with you on this last question. And that really is, and we have, I saw a chat, I'm not keeping up with all of the chat questions, but I did see one about with a woman that had joined that has 3 kids. So she might be thinking of going back. So Grace, why would you encourage girls and women to consider a career in law?
I think a career in law offers a lot of opportunities. And I think that if you're interested in it, there's a lot of options. And I think that's one thing that's really great about it. Whether you like to speak and you see yourself in the courtroom every day as a prosecutor or a public defender, or rather, if you're really interested in companies and how they work and you'd love to prepare their contracts, I think it can be a really fantastic career.
Thank you so much. Judge Scott, let's go with you next on this one.
Well, if you don't mind, may I ask a different question that I saw in the chat a while ago? Because I think it might be kind of interesting for people. What I would suggest, if it's something that you're interested in, particularly for those in high school or even maybe in college, is in high school, for example, in Utah, they have a wonderful mock trial program through the Utah State Bar. It gives you a great opportunity to try it out. Pre-COVID, they'd come into the courtroom, real judges would judge them, and you have a chance to be a lawyer and see if you like it. The other option for you, and it's I think is really nice, it's one of the benefits of COVID, is that court is open to the public. And so you can go to your local courthouse. Every community has a courthouse. You can go to the courthouse and sit in the back of the courtroom and watch what goes on, watch what the lawyers do, watch what the judges do. Or you can look on their docket. If you go online to a court website, it should show you what hearings are going on that day and provide a WebEx link. So for a lot of things like a criminal calendar, a criminal law in motion calendar, you can actually log on and watch the entire thing online. Jury trials, you can do the same thing. And so if you're thinking about it and you're interested, that might be a first step to seeing if this is something that you'd like to do or like to work towards.
I love that. And I love Judge Porter. Do you have a question that you're seeing in the chat that you would like to answer? Or you can answer the question that I posed on why you would encourage young women to have a careers in law.
Okay, well, I've been typing chat, so I've been having fun doing that as well. So I'll do both. Number one, the first question is, why would I encourage young women to consider a career in law? Because it offers flexibility to do what you're interested in. There are so many different ways to use your law degree. There are so many ways that allow you to balance things in your family life that you might be interested in with what you're doing with your work. And there are so many different ways to serve. And you can do, in fact, that's part of what we've been talking about a little bit in the chat. And then we've got someone named Shake saying, where can we find internships? One of the best things to do, Judge Scott hit it right on the head, with WebEx right now, you can watch and see if it's something you're interested in. And then you can, I had a law student come in and work for me all summer last year. You can look at attending court. You can look at checking in to see if law firms need runners or people to help with the copying. There's lots of different opportunities as you're moving forward to get more information, shall we say, before you make that decision whether or not law school is a good idea. And then once you're in law school, there's a very active career advancement at the law school that'll help do placements for things like these opportunities.
Thank you so much. So we have about 4 minutes. So any other questions, Grace? I mean, any of you that you're seeing in the chat that you would like to respond to as we finish up?
One of my favorite things about being a lawyer and being a judge, the people that I work with are wonderful. And it's been so much fun today because I used to work with Grace a long time ago when we were at Parsons, Bailey, and Latham together. And obviously I work with Denise on the bench, but throughout my almost 30-year career, I have had incredible friends, mentors, and colleagues in all different areas of the law, all different types of jobs. And I think you'll find a really supportive community. And the women lawyers in Utah have a very strong organization. We're really interested in providing opportunities for young women. And we would love to have you join us.
So I'm going to jump in. Ginger McKinley asked, do you ever get stressed out? And I just had a big grin on my face because Ms. McKinley, every day. Doing the work that we all do, what Grace does, what Judge Scott does, it's serious work and it requires serious people to do that work. But I will tell you that there is nothing more rewarding than watching somebody be adopted. The very first thing I got to do as a judge is perform an adoption, help people work through some of the best and worst times in their lives, help companies that have big disagreements that affect our whole community. It is certainly stressful, but it is equally, if not more so, worthwhile. So, but it is not an easy road by any means.
And I'll jump in with one of them. So someone was asking the top things that admissions look at when you're applying to law school. Get really good grades, which I think studying something you're interested in helps out tremendously with that because you actually want to study it. And so that's the main thing in doing well on the LSAT. But I think people often get hung up on what law school they go to. I noticed another question asked if it was worth going to an Ivy. I went to an Ivy for my undergrad, but not for law school. And so since I did not do that for law school, I was able to graduate debt-free, and that trade-off was worth it for me. That said, if you're looking to do a United States Supreme Court clerkship, or there's certain positions that will be easier for you if you do go to those schools. So I think it depends on what your goals are.
So Judge Scott, Kaylee B asks, what was the first thing that you said about when you were getting on and trying to see what you liked about being a lawyer? I think that they might have missed that first part of your answer.
Oh, was it going to the courthouse mock trial? So I don't know if that's what the question is referring to. The Utah State Bar has a law and education. I'm not quite sure how it's a division or what it is, but they do mock trials for junior high and high school students. And it's a great opportunity to participate on a mock trial team. They give you a case study. They give you a chance to go into the courtroom and act as a lawyer and get feedback from judges. And so that would be the first thing if you're in junior high or high school and you have that available at your school. The other is just going to your local courthouse and sitting in the back of the courthouse and watching court proceedings. Courthouses are open to the public, jury trials are open to the public, and almost every community that I'm aware of has a courthouse, whether it's a district court or a justice court.
Thank you so much for your time and contributing to this panel tonight. And we'll bring you back when we get to Q&A. Thank you so much. I would love to have you all get a question you want to answer. We just have 1 minute per person. Judge Porter, one question that you would love to answer that you've seen online or so forth.
There was a question a little bit ago about the need for good mentors, and Judge Scott really hit the nail on the head. We have had the good fortune of having all kinds of mentors, both male, female. The Utah State Bar requires a mentorship when you have your law degree. And quite frankly, all of us that have gotten here have not done it alone. And so it is our pleasure, and we're certainly happy to always give back. That's part of the reason we're all chatting here today. So even though time is tight for everyone, it truly is our pleasure to be here. And there are always people out there willing to help you in your journey. And I'm just happy to get a visit with everyone.
Looking over these questions, I noticed a kind of a common pattern, and that's that everyone is seriously thinking about what's important to them and what they want to do with their lives. And I think that attending panels like this is just fantastic. I am a first-generation American, and I never really thought that I would have a professional career until I started going to college. So the one thing I wanted to share is, even if something seems unfamiliar or you don't know anything about it, talking to people, like Judge Porter just said, reaching out and attending panels, people are really willing to share their experiences, and I think anything is possible.
First of all, thank you for including me in this. And I really enjoyed listening to the panelists about nonprofit, because nonprofits tend to go hand in hand with the law. As a judge, we rely on a lot of organizations to provide services to underrepresented persons and people who can't afford lawyers, et cetera. But I think the last thing that I would comment on, and it has also been sort of a theme, is don't be afraid to take a chance, take a risk, see if it's something that interests you. You know, people change careers throughout their lives. You're going to be working 40, maybe even 50 years. And so I really think it's important to pursue your passion, but also not to be afraid to try something different, to try something that maybe you didn't think would be the perfect fit. When I went to law school, I knew a couple things. I didn't want to be a litigator, and I hated my real property class. And it turns out that when I was practicing law, I was doing litigation, and I was a real estate attorney. So that would be my advice for everyone. Take a risk, take a chance, don't be afraid to fail, and just go for it.
Thank you so much to all our panelists today. And thank you to our sponsors, the Utah Education Network, the John M. Huntsman School of Business, and USU Extension for making this event possible. Thanks again to our panelists and for everyone joining. Have a wonderful evening.